Hi, I'm Catherine Gregory, co-founder of Modern Wisdom Press, and I'm super excited to have our author, Dr. Jessica Grossmeier, with us today to talk about her new book. Jessica.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, tell us the title of your book. Maybe if you have a copy, you could show it to us and tell us why you wrote the book and what inspired you to write on this topic.
Sure. So the book is Reimagining Workplace Wellbeing, Fostering a Culture of Purpose, Connection, and Transcendence. And the book takes an area that I started to study last year, which is workplace spirituality and spiritual well-being. And it incorporates it into what I've been doing for the last 25 years, which was identifying the best practice approaches to workplace well-being more generally. And in terms of why I wrote the book, about 10 years ago, I experienced a wake-up call for myself where I had gotten to a place of severe fatigue and burnout. I felt disengaged from my job. I felt like I had lost the passion for what I was doing. And the path that I took to get back to a place of personal and professional thriving ended up being not just a well-being journey, but a spiritual journey. And it required me, in addition to just creating some ways to recover and rest, which I had to figure out how to do, I also needed to reconnect with my purpose and understanding what's important and meaningful to me in the world of work and what's important to me outside of work and the balance of that, and making sure I was extremely intentional about protecting those priorities and figuring out how to do that. I had to largely navigate that journey on my own. And I came into a sabbatical last year, which I intentionally created so that I could reflect more deeply on the question, what is the purpose for the next 20 to 30 years of my work life? So I've been doing this for about 25 years, milestone birthday last year of 50. And I knew that I wanted to pause and reflect. And as I entered into that time, I brought into it this question of, where do I find my purpose and passion? How do I help others discover that for themselves? And that led me into the research around workplace spirituality. And as I dug into the research and started to talk with other workplace well-being professionals about what I was discovering, I realized people weren't aware of this research that existed. I also became increasingly aware that there was actually a lot the workplace could do to help people who are feeling lost and like they're not sure what their purpose is in their work and they're not sure how to create that balance. And so to me, it made the most sense to put these ideas into a book that could help people who were responsible for well-being in the workplace to understand that this science exists and how we can better support our people around a more holistic approach to well-being, which includes addressing purpose, values, meaning, connection, and belonging, as well as what I call transcendence, which is connecting to something bigger than ourselves. And so that's really why I wrote the book, is so that I could help other people become aware of the good research that exists and to provide help and support for the millions of Americans who feel like they have to quit their jobs because they don't even have that support to have that journey of discovery for themselves. Their only solution is I have to quit my job just so I have time to even think about this. And I had to take a sabbatical to really think about this. And so I'm hoping that my book can help organizations to provide the support for people to be navigating this journey of purpose, connection, and transcendence for themselves without having to leave the workplace. If we could start to incorporate some of these practices that I discovered into the workplace environment, which we can, because organizations are doing it, then I think we can actually help to meet some really important needs that we're seeing in the workplace today.
That's really beautiful, Jessica. And just tell us a little bit about your previous work in research, because I know that had a big piece of why you chose to dig into this research and discover this research in the first place.
Well, thank you for that. When I started as a researcher in 2001, I had come from a place of being a practitioner where I was designing and implementing everything from executive health screenings to personal training to individual exercise and group exercise classes. So I was, the fitness junkie in the workplace, trying to make sure we have healthy vending machine options. That's what I did. And I decided to go back to school because I felt like we weren't using the research enough to inform the approaches that we were taking, and we weren't evaluating what we were doing. And so I went back to school for my master's in public health and really started to look at, well, how can we use theory? How can we use research to inform developing and designing more effective programs, and then actually proving and demonstrating that? I ended up discovering that I actually love program evaluation work. And so when I graduated, I ended up getting a job in research where I was taking these programs that I'd helped design and deliver and start to evaluate, well, what's actually working. And eventually I went from doing outcomes research, where I was helping to demonstrate that if you did these programs well and design workplace well-being initiatives well, you could actually produce savings in the form of lower absence, higher performance, healthcare cost impact after a while. And then it shifted to, well, what are the specific practices that drive those outcomes? And so my whole research career of 25 years has been on identifying how do we design and develop effective workplace well-being initiatives. And as I enter into this new work, I think it really follows nicely from that, because I'm using the research again and it was a discovery for me, because I didn't know this research existed until a year ago. It was a discovery for me to understand how can we draw from the research to bring new solutions into the workplace, because employers are saying what we've been doing is not working clearly. If you look at, the voluntary quit rates and the levels of burnout, clearly there are unmet needs. And so can we use the research to help us understand how to better meet those needs? It really is a continuation of what I've been doing my whole career, just with this specific focus area.
Yeah, and you say, wellness programs, I think there's a concept that it is like healthy vending machines and fitness programs, but this whole aspect of purpose and the word spirituality, right, in the workplace, like that's a challenge, I think, for some organizations to address. And so this research is really important. Can you just talk a little bit about how you are working with the well-being professionals in these organizations to really open their minds to understanding purpose and values and spirituality as a piece of the wellness, protocol per se?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to address a think tank, and this is the best and brightest organizations and people thinking deeply about how do we need to get this right in the workplace, and what new solutions do we need to be bringing in. And we had a lot of discussion around terminology. And, when you talk about meaning and purpose, connection and belonging, connecting to something bigger than yourself, is that spirituality? Does it need to be called that? And what I've discovered from talking with people who've been doing this work for a long time is that, one, we don't necessarily need to call it spirituality. Instead, we can call it purpose. We can call it social connection. And when you look at there's one of the things that they have in workplace well-being is everybody kind of has their wellness wheel, and they have these dimensions of we're going to focus on these areas with our well-being initiatives. Sometimes it's only 4 things. It might be we're going to focus on physical health, mental health, social health, and financial well-being. Those are very common. Others might have up to 10 domains. And sometimes they call it spiritual well-being. Other times I've seen organizations and they call it purpose. There's one model that I talk about in the book, and they simply label this dimension being. And it's about understanding who you are, understanding what you value and is important to you, and creating ways to live that out in the world so that what you're doing in your work and what you're doing in your life is actually a reflection of what you think is most important and what you value. And so people don't have to call it spirituality. They don't need to use that label. But I think as people delve into this, whatever they want to call it, they have to understand when they ask people these questions, What's important to you? What matters most? How do you want to be remembered in this world? What do you value? And then how do you translate that into how you live every single day? For many people, 70–80%, they're going to be grounded in a faith tradition, a wisdom practice, religion, if you will. And so we also need to create space for people to talk about this in ways that are representative of who they are and how they identify themselves. And so I think that there are very strong connections to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, because in that space, they're talking about how do we welcome the whole person so that people can show up at work, who they are, as they are, with an understanding of here's who I am and how I live out a reflection of my values in my everyday work, and how do I connect with other people. For them, they're going to be talking about spirituality. And so how do we bring some of the same boundaries of respect and curiosity into the conversations about this stuff so that people can talk about this meaningfully? And so that's just unpacking a little bit of how I think we need to think about this. And whether you call it spirituality or not, you need to be sensitive to the fact that for some people, they're going to be bringing in these other dimensions, and how do we create space for that?
Yeah, so thank you for clarifying that. And I know that you are speaking to a lot of organizations, and cultural shifts have to happen within an organization for this to trickle down to the employee level. And so as far as your work goes in the world, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I know you have a speaking career, and this is a new focus in your research and your business now. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So one of the things I've been doing a lot of is taking the concepts from the book and making them more tangible, which again is sort of like how do we translate research into practice, which has always been a passion of mine. And so the book is actually packed full of very specific examples for each of these three areas. I devote a chapter to purpose, a chapter to connection and belonging, and a chapter to transcendence, which again is connecting people to something larger than themselves. And there are very specific evidence-based strategies that organizations are doing. And so in my speaking and in my advising and in my writing about this, I'm paying more attention to what are those specific practices that organizations can build into their well-being initiatives.
I love that. And I love that it is evidence-based and you've done your research, and thankfully you took a sabbatical to have the time to be able to dig in and discover all of this. So how can people find you, Jessica? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm primarily using LinkedIn as my social media platform. And so my continuing to think about this, to highlight other organizations who are doing this well, to unpack the concepts from the book. You'll find those posts on LinkedIn. As I'm speaking, I'm providing links to those publicly available pieces of content. And then I have a website, 𝘍𝙠𝙗𝙗𝙗.com, where there are free resources, a list of free resources that anybody can tap into, whether it's taking their workplace well-being initiative to the next level or specifically addressing workplace spirituality. You'll find a lot of resources there, and I'm continuing to add to those.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your work in the world. So important.